April 15, 1450. The English hold on the Normandy Peninsula is collapsing, bringing the Hundred Years' War to its tipping point. For over a century, the English military apparatus relied almost entirely on the Agincourt model. This tactical doctrine was built on static, archer-heavy defensive positions and prepared terrain intended to force the enemy into a meat grinder. But by 1450, the Lancastrian forces occupying France are bankrupt. Unpaid troops and intense domestic unrest back in London have left the English garrison scattered and critically weakened. To secure their failing grip on Normandy, the English assemble a final relief force of roughly 4,000 men under the command of Sir Thomas Curiel. Curiel's army composition is heavily weighted toward a single capability. He brings nearly 3,000 longbowmen, but a minimal corps of heavily armored men-at-arms and billmen. A billman is an infantry soldier armed with a bill, a long-handled chopping blade used for close-quarters melee. This total reliance on a static, century-old doctrine left the English with a rigid tactical profile. To succeed, they required an opponent willing to charge directly into their prepared positions. While the English stagnate, French King Charles VII uses the temporary 1444 Truce of Tours to systematically overhaul his military infrastructure. He introduces the tile tax reform. The tile is a direct land tax that provides the permanent state funding necessary to replace unreliable mercenaries with a standing professional army. Charles uses this revenue to create the compagnies d'ordonnance, disciplined, regularly paid cavalry and infantry units capable of rapid operational deployment across the country. Next, he appoints the Bureau brothers to integrate standardized mobile gunpowder artillery, utilizing crumbled gunpowder. Crumbled, or corned powder, is processed so its chemical components do not separate during transport, making it highly reliable in the field. To intercept the English relief force, Charles dispatches two commanders, Jean de Clermont leading a 3,000-man blocking force, and Arthur de Richmond leading 2,000 Breton cavalry from the south. The upcoming clash at Formigny represents the first collision between a rigid feudal mindset and a modernized, state-funded military machine. Curiel makes a fatal timing error. Instead of rushing directly to Bayeux, he spends weeks besieging the small town of Valognes. This delay gives two separate French armies the time they need to converge on his position. On April 14th, Curiel halts at the village of Formigny. He decides to deploy his forces across the Carentan Road to block Clermont's approach. This grid shows the English defense, backed by the stream, fronted by stakes and trenches. Clermont arrives from the west with 3,000 men, halting at a safe distance. French cavalry probes the flanks, but are repelled by high-volume longbow fire. A 3-hour stalemate sets in. Younger French captains urge a direct attack, while veterans of Agincourt caution restraint against the wooden stakes. Up to this exact moment, the English defensive geometry functions flawlessly. It creates a tactical stalemate that, historically, always resulted in an English victory. Clermont breaks the stalemate by bringing two light culverins to the front line. A culverin is an early, relatively mobile field cannon used to target infantry. This map illustrates the critical range discrepancy. The cannons are positioned deliberately outside the maximum effective range of the English longbows. The French possess a longer, overlapping arc of fire. The cannons begin enfilading fire, shooting laterally down the length of the enemy's formation. Iron cannonballs tear directly through the tightly packed, static English infantry. The psychological and physical impact is immediate. The English cannot return fire, taking casualties without the ability to engage the enemy. Curiel is forced into a desperate reaction. He orders English Captain Matthew Goff to lead 600 archers in a forward charge out from behind their protective stakes. The counterattack yields a localized success. The English archers overwhelm the French gunners through sheer rate of fire and physically capture the two cannons. Clermont's vanguard is thrown into disarray by the sudden aggression. For a moment, the battle's momentum swings entirely to the English. However, the introduction of mobile field artillery succeeds in breaking the foundational English doctrine. Static defenders are forced to abandon their fortifications and fight in the open to survive. The roar of those captured cannons seals the fate of the English. The noise physically alerts Arthur de Richmond to the exact location of the battlefield. On the grid, Richemond's Breton force arrives south, creating an L-shaped threat. Curiel attempts refusing the line, pivoting his left flank 90 degrees. This mathematically fails. stretching the same number of men over a massive double-front perimeter. Curiel only possesses roughly 800 heavily armored men-at-arms. Because of this, the stretched line is now primarily composed of highly vulnerable, unarmored archers. French commander Pierre de Brézé exploits this chaos. He leads a mounted force to capture the eastern field fortifications, entirely cutting off the English route of retreat to Bayeux. Refusing the line is a theoretically sound tactical maneuver, but it mathematically fails when infantry density is too low to hold back a two-front envelopment. The climax hits from two fronts simultaneously. Clermont launches a general advance over the stone bridge from the west, while Richemont charges from the south. The French heavy cavalry accelerates across the battlefield, crashing directly into the thinned, disorganized ranks of Gough's redeploying archers. The English left wing immediately disintegrates. Gough's cavalry breaks formation and flees the field toward Bayeux. Curiel desperately attempts to pull his remaining forces back into the village gardens to form a final, tight defensive perimeter. A brutal, close-quarters melee follows. Even local French peasants join the slaughter of the trapped English troops. A group of 500 English longbowmen refuse to surrender, fighting to the last man in the village gardens by the stream. This massacre is the mechanical result of outdated infantry caught in a mobile, combined arms trap. The English field army ceases to exist. Over 3,500 English soldiers are dead, and Sir Thomas Curiel is taken prisoner. French casualties are estimated at under 1,000 men, proving the efficiency of Charles VII's new military apparatus. The strategic fallout in Normandy is immediate. Because the English pulled troops from their garrisons to form Curiel's army, their fortifications are left completely defenseless. The French execute a rapid operational exploitation, capturing Vire, Bayeux, and finally Caen after a 3-week artillery bombardment by the Bureau brothers. In August 1450, Cherbourg falls. Decades of Lancastrian English rule in the Duchy of Normandy officially end. The political shockwave from this defeat reverberates across the Channel, directly fueling the domestic outrage that soon ignites the Wars of the Roses. Formigny proved that the Longbow heavy defensive line could no longer hold territory. The English were driven from Normandy, defeated by a professionalized French army that had mastered the coordination of cavalry and field artillery.